John here again, and today talking about and reviewing the 1966 film Fantastic Voyage. And right off the bat, this film is the definition of a sci-fi classic with aspects of adventure. And I wonder if Joe Dante saw this film back in the day and he took inspiration from this to make Inner Space and the whole concept of miniaturization, which is a concept that you don't really see a whole lot when it comes to films. I mean, it's only been done maybe, 3 or 4 times, with Inner Space and, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, and more recently Ant-Man. But it's a concept, that's not really, explored a whole lot, film-wise. But, with this film, for a 1966 film, the production value and the images and the sequences they pulled off, it's quite trippy, but it's fun to look at. In the plot, I'll read off IMDb here. You have this brilliant scientist, Bennis. The film opens up with this character, and he's developed a way to shrink humans and other objects for brief periods of time. And Bennis, who is working in communist Russia, is transported by the CIA to America, but is attacked en route. Their motorcade is attacked, and in order to save the scientist, who has developed a blood clot in his brain, a team of Americans in a nuclear submarine is shrunk and injected into Bennis's body while he's in a coma, and they have 1 hour to fix the clot and get out before the miniaturization wears off. And that's pretty much the plot. And again, it has adventure. You have the sci-fi element. And it's just a fun movie. I had fun with this movie. And, again, just some of the stuff they could pull off. And again, this is 1966, and I'll talk more about the production value, but it was just, it's imaginative, and inventive, just some of the stuff they pulled off with this movie. And I guess getting to the cast, you have the main character Grant, who was played by Stephen Boyd, which I think he's passed. Yeah, he passed away back in 1977, which is unfortunate. But as far as other films, the last thing he did was an episode of Hawaii Five-0. And from what I understand, he passed away shortly after filming that episode of The Rebels. But other films he's been in Ben-Hur, The Oscar, let's see. In the 70s, he did films like Those Dirty Dogs, which I've never heard of, The Treasure of Jamaica Reef, Montana Trap, Lady Dracula. Passed away at 45. Too young. But I thought he was good in the film. You have this female character, Cora, who is played by Raquel Welch, if I can get her name right. She would go on to be in Three Musketeers, Fathom, which I never heard of. And the last thing she did was a couple of years ago, but she's been in a lot of TV shows like American Family and Lois and Clark and Mork and Mindy. Let's see here. CSI Miami, she was in an episode of that. She's still living. You have the general in the film, who's played by Edmund O'Brien. Other films he's been in: The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, 7 Days in May, White Heat. He was fine in the film. Donald Pleasance is probably the one name that I, recognize in the film. I mean, Dr. Loomis, of course. Donald Pleasance is a great actor, definitely missed, from The Great Escape, but, more notably, the Halloween films is Dr. Loomis. And, I thought he was good in the film. As this character, as this scientist, and in the end, he finds out that You find out that he's in it for himself. Yeah, I was just looking at Donald Pleasant's filmography, but yeah, I mean, he was Blofeld. I mean, you only live twice, but Donald Pleasance is good in the film. I mean, what more can you say about him? Now, the guy who directed this film is Richard Fleischer. Richard Fleischer. Is it Fleischer or Fleischer? Richard Fleischer, I guess. I'll just stick with that. But this guy went on to direct a lot of stuff. After this movie, he would direct Dr. Dolittle in 1967, Tor, which I actually remember watching that in middle school. Soylent Green, which I've heard about. Mr. Majestic, The Jazz Singer, Conan the Destroyer, Red Sonja, $1 Million Mystery, The Vikings back in 1958. And unfortunately he's passed away. But I thought, he did a good job with directing this film and, handling, the production and, the characters and, the special effects is quite interesting. And the guy who wrote the screenplay is Harry Kleiner. And this guy also wrote the screenplay for, let's see here. After this, he would write the screenplay for Extreme Prejudice and Red Heat. So the same guy who wrote Red Heat with Schwarzenegger and Belushi, before that, wrote this, which is interesting. And, he's since passed away. But, the cast, for the most part does a fine job. And the pacing of the film, it's about an hour and 40. But I never got bored with the film. It kept me interested, throughout the film and, the exploration aspect and just some of the scenes, is interesting. Like, there's scenes where the sub is in the lungs and because they're trying to replenish, I guess, energy for the sub. You have scenes where they're in the ear. And, of course, nowadays people would scoff at that kind of stuff, and the effects they had back then. But I think it's interesting. Again, just some of the... I keep going back to production value and, you got the scene where the lady scientist, the antibodies are attached to her and they're trying to pick them. And then when they pull her back in, picking them off. I thought that was fun. It's just some of the things they were able to pull off. It's just definitely... It's eye candy. And it's interesting to watch. And again, for 1966, it's inventive. And the budget for this film was $5 million. I don't know what, as far as box office, what it made back. But going through trivia, let's see, when filming the scene where the other crew members removed the attacking antibodies from Mrs. Peterson for the first time, director allowed the actors to grab what they pleased. Gentlemen all, they specifically avoided removing them from her breasts, with an end result that the director described as the Las Vegas showgirl effect. The director pointed this out to the cast members on the second try. The actors all reached for her breasts. Finally, the director realized that he would have to choreograph who removed what from where, and the result is seen in the final cut. Interesting. Imagine if that happened now. A now defunct thrill ride at Disney's Epcot Center called Body Wars was largely inspired by the film, even though it's not a Disney film. The director, however, also directed Disney's first science fiction film, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Um, the film Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea reportedly borrowed props from the elaborate sets of this film. Um, let's see here. The design and special effects were considered cutting edge at the time, so much so that they received a photo spread and article by Life magazine. Interesting. There have been several high-profile attempts to remake the film over the years with James Cameron, Roland Emmerich, and Will Smith, Paul Greengrass, and more recently Guillermo del Toro, all attached at various stages. Did not know that. When this film was produced, the film was produced the same year as the original Lost in Space series. If you pay attention to the sets and the sound effects, you can sense the similarities. So that's interesting. But yeah, let's see. There's more trivia. But as far as alternate versions, the DVD edition has the following prologue. The makers of this film are indebted to the many doctors, technicians, and research scientists whose knowledge and insight helped guide this production. The TV/video version features the prologue instead, which is included in this Blu-ray. And the film opens up with this. This film will take you where no one has ever been before. No eyewitness has actually seen what you're about to see. But in this world of ours, where going to the moon will soon be upon us, and where the most incredible things are happening all around us someday, perhaps tomorrow, then fantastic events you're about to see can and will take place. And, you open the film with that prologue. But I was trying to think what else to mention. But yeah, like I said, Fantastic Voyage. It's a very interesting movie, and again, I keep going back, to being a sci-fi classic, and just again, some of the things they could pull off during this time, it's really interesting, and again, people might, nowadays they would brush off this kind of movie as, being dated and, and so on and so forth. But overall, Fantastic Voyage, this is a good flick. A sci-fi classic, and it really, if you like the idea of miniaturization, and yeah, that type of premise, this is a fun one. And again, I don't know if Joe Dante saw this movie back in the day, and that's what inspired Interspace. I have to imagine he did, because it's a fun movie, and yeah, I don't know what more I can say. So, good production value, at the time, good special effects. The cast is fine, and features, you do have a commentary by film and music historian Jeff Bond, isolated score track with commentary by film and music historians Jeff Bond, John Burlingame, Lava Lamps and Celluloid, a trip, can't read, a tribute to the visual effects of Fantastic Voyage, storyboard to scene comparison, the whirlpool scene. So, yeah, some nice sequences. Again, with some of the scenes where they're inside the body and they're traveling through the body and the bloodstreams, and you can see these different cells. but and it's all practical. And that's another thing I forgot to mention. It's all practical. Nowadays, it would just look bad. It would just be bad CGI and, terrible green screen. But they were able to pull off, this type of sci-fi adventure with these effects back in 1966. And it looks so much better than a lot of films today that try hard and it looks bad and it looks horrendous. Back then they had to use practical effects, and actually it's better to look at, and it's a lot of fun. So that's my review of Fantastic Voyage. Check it out. I do recommend the film. That's pretty much all I got. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.